and complete the installation. Now I've already done that. I actually did the vSphere client installation while the recording was paused because it's not terribly interesting. There's nothing to see. You just literally click next, next, next all the way through to the end, and there aren't really even any selections or options for you to configure. If you don't want to make this installer available to your users, and that makes complete sense because it just doesn't make a lot of sense for them to have to go to find an installer to actually locate the client, you can actually go to HTTP and the URL of the server that vCenter is installed onto to download that vSphere client from that location. You see here, download vSphere client right here, and that'll actually go through, download the vSphere client. It also provides access to the vSphere documentation. There's a couple of other tools you can do down here, the vSphere web client here, and the web-based data store browser and the SDK are also available here from this location. Again, this is the location where you just go and download that vSphere client. I have already installed the vSphere client onto this server, so you'll notice if I go to the Start menu and come down here to VMware vSphere client, well, that actually launches the client itself. If I go here to vc.company.pri and then punch in my username and my password and click the log on button, you'll see that this will actually log on to my vCenter server. Now, when I install vCenter server, it actually creates a self-signed certificate to be used in authenticating the client to the server. Obviously, if you know anything about certificates, self-signed certificates are not necessarily trusted by your client. And so, if your security policy mandates it, you will want to actually install a trusted SSL certificate on your server, a server certificate that prevents this warning from appearing. You can click the View Certificate button here to see more information about this certificate, but what you need to know effectively is that right now you don't actually have a trusted authenticated connection from client to server. You can, however, ignore this error message and just perfectly go right on through from client to server, or install the certificate so that you don't actually get any display warnings for vc.company.pri. At this point, I'm going to ignore the error message and just allow this to complete making that connection between client and server. You'll see here it's loading the inventory and discovering plugins and loading the main form and all the things it needs to do to bring up what is effectively my connection between client and server. So here's the vSphere client. Right? And if I minimize this down here at the bottom, you can see that right now there's not much to look at. I don't actually have any ESX hosts that are connected into this server, so there's really not that much to look at this point. The one thing I do want to make you aware of is this plugins node up here, that if I click and choose Manage Plugins, you'll see the different plugins that are available and installed for this server. Now, 3 are actually installed by default and are ready to be used: the Service Status, Hardware Status, and the vCenter Storage Monitoring Service plugins. A little bit later on, we'll be working with some different plugins that we'll need to install and then make available, which we can do so by right-clicking and choosing the options to enable them and install them. But for right now, we've actually got these plugins ready to go, and there's really nothing to look at this point. Now, we will be using this vCenter server throughout the entirety of the rest of this series, and we'll be going through pretty much all of the different selections here so you can see what each of them do and what they're all meant for. But what we want to do at this point is actually take a look at, instead of the vSphere client, the vSphere web client, the actual server piece that allows you to connect via a web browser to ESX hosts through vCenter server. You should notice here the little important dialog box that reminds you that some new improvements in license reporting require the installation of this client. So just like before, if I hit the install button and then allow it to go through your regular installation process here, this will actually install the vSphere web client to allow me to connect into this server over the web. So if I choose next and next, and then I agree, and then next again, there are some really minimal configurations to be aware of for this installation. Not that much that's really important to look at. The most important of which here is what your HTTP and HTTPS ports are going to be. Now, these 2 ports, as you'll notice, are not the typical HTTP and HTTPS ports, because those 2 ports are already being consumed by vCenter server. So we have to choose different ports here in order to support this web client. And you would not do yourself